The WNBA playoffs are in full swing, and Tommy Alter's The Young Man in the Three brings you closer to the game. Get complete WNBA playoff coverage as Tommy sits down with the game's biggest stars and delivers unmatched analysis. The Young Man in the Three's WNBA playoff coverage is presented by Quest Nutrition. From irresistibly crunchy protein chips to rich chocolatey protein bars, these treats make giving in feel so good. Quest, big on protein, low on sugar, huge on flavor. Shop Quest on Amazon at amazon.com/Quest Nutrition and enjoy all the WNBA action on The Young Man in the Three wherever you get your podcasts.
When it comes to hiring great talent, Indeed is all business needs. Their sponsored job feature puts postings at the top of search results, helping employers reach ideal candidates faster. With 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs, according to Indeed data, businesses can build their dream team without delay. No monthly subscriptions or long-term contracts. Employers only pay for results. Every minute, 23 people are hired through Indeed worldwide. Speed up hiring today with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/WonderyUS. Just mention hearing about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
The amazing KKC.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with KKC, and I have such a great episode for you today. I have one of the most astounding rescue stories, the subject of a new documentary on National Geographic, Hulu, and Disney Plus called Lost in the Jungle. The Amazon rainforest, often called the lungs of the earth, is a place of staggering beauty and untamed danger. It stretches across 9 countries, a vast green labyrinth where every sound, every shadow carries both wonder and threat. But it's not just nature that shapes this jungle. For decades, Colombia's rainforest has been at the crossroads of politics, conflict, and survival. A contested land where indigenous traditions, armed struggles, and government interests collide. And it is within this setting that one of the most extraordinary survival stories of our time unfolded. On May 1st, 2023, a small plane carrying 4 indigenous children plunged into the Colombian Amazon. Their mother and the pilots did not survive. Left alone in one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth, the siblings, ages 13, 9, 4, and just 11 months, endured 40 harrowing days and nights in the jungle. They battled hunger, rain, predators, and the unknown, guided only by the instincts and knowledge passed down through generations. As the Colombian military and indigenous trackers launched a massive search operation, the nation and the world held its breath. For the first time ever, this story is told in the voices of those who lived it. Lost in the Jungle, a new documentary, brings us inside the survival and the rescue. The courage of the children, the relentless determination of their rescuers, and the fragile unity of a country too often divided. It is a tale of resilience, of hope against all odds, and what is possible when human beings come together. Today, I sit down with the filmmakers who captured this unprecedented story. We're going to explore how they gained the trust of the children, the challenges of filming in the Amazon, and why this story resonates far beyond Colombia. This is not just a survival story, it's a reminder of what it means to be human and what it takes to endure. Here is my interview with the filmmakers, Chai and Juan. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you, and thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I have long been obsessed with the stories of the FARC, so this was absolutely right up my alley. You know, it's a huge undertaking, and it's the story of children. So my first question is, what compelled you to tell this story now and from Leslie's perspective?
It is very important in my country because, as you know, we live in a country that has been divided for so many years, and have still been divided, and after the peace process with the FARC, nothing has really changed in those terms. We have still a country full of violence, where there is difference still being at the top of the table every day. We now have extreme polarization. And I think that nowadays it's very important to bring into consideration the fact that two completely different groups that normally used to actually, be being against each other, like the Indigenous, that some of them or many of them have been part of illegal armed groups in the country, and the armed forces which are against them, have been able to work together and being able, to create something beautiful, which was this rescue operation. I think it's a power message for a country like ours in this moment and for this world, which is so polarized. And at the same time, I think that in a country which a third of it is the Amazon, and sometimes people in our countries tend to forget, how big and how important it is, the jungle. It is a moment to actually understand that there is something bigger and very important to respect and to get the knowledge from. So I think it is a moment of need to hope and to bring people together and not to divide. And I think that's kind of the message, that if we can work together as recognizing our differences, we can make something good for this world.
So in the beginning, how do you build trust with the children, especially given the trauma that they've experienced in their ages?
Well, we were very mindful of, that it was incredibly important to approach the children with respect and kind of dignity. And so we worked very closely with the mental health professionals who have been with them since they were found. And I think you see at the end of the film, you see like Ken and Solini playing with the figurines, like these, airplane, a toy airplane, as well as little figures that represent each one of the children. And that was very much part of their therapy. And so, it was actually their therapist who worked with us on the interview. And, it was really important to both of us to allow Leslie and her siblings the opportunity to share their story in their own words, because that's something you don't often see from victims of domestic abuse, as well as like Indigenous stories in general, right? It's not that often. And so, so it just, it was a lot of work, but like that was the point, that's the good work to do. And it took us a long time to gain access, but that was, part of the job.
Mm. Well, she was only 13 at this time, and then becomes the leader of these siblings. What surprised you most about how she described her decisions and, of course, her actions during those 40 days?
I think you cannot overstate, like there's a scene at the end when they're found, and, one of the special forces asks her, how long have you been lost? And she's like 8 to 10 days. I don't know. Like, I think that her state, like they were starving. And however, what really struck me, because it was a mystery, like from the very beginning, when you realize that these 4 children were able to survive for 40 days in the Amazon, there's a question. It's like, how, why, how is this possible? And the moment I met her, I was like, oh, this is a special person. There's something extraordinary about her. And I think there's several elements to it. One is that she has always been like a mother to her siblings. She was the one in charge, like, just because, like, that's the circumstance of her life. And I think that, but there's also just this inner light to her. And you can see it when she smiles. You can see it when she laughs, that it's both that she has been able to hold on to like this certain, like she's still like a young person, but she's smart. And I think she was very committed to her siblings and made that choice to brave possibly going back to her stepfather, but in order to save her siblings.
So then how do you navigate, because it seems overwhelming, probably when you begin this project, how do you navigate telling their version of events without re-traumatizing them?
It's a really good question. And we worked very closely with mental health professionals. Like, I'm a mother of 2. This is the second film I've made about kids who went through a harrowing experience. And, my first was the rescue about the Thai football team that was stuck in the cave. That flooded. And so it was just, for me, like, this is a story of empowerment. And there's also a therapeutic quality to be able to represent your own story. So that was kind of the North Star, and then just working and being very mindful of the mental health professionals, and I think, we were super mindful, like how we even used the footage of when they're found, because it's incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
It's shocking. I can't get over it as a mother. And, and then also, like how we use the animation, which was very deliberate because, how do you try to convey the way a child looks at the jungle, especially an Indigenous child who has grown up in that jungle, and also not impose our feelings or our like ideas of narrative on top of them, so it was just, I think it's about craft and about respect.
Looking for an electric SUV that doesn't compromise on space? Meet the all-new 2026 Ioniq 9, Hyundai's first 3-row, all-electric EV. Space in an EV, finally. With an impressive 335-mile range, this isn't your typical EV. Go further with up to an estimated 150 miles of charge in just 15 minutes on the Ioniq RWD9S when using a 350-kilowatt DC ultra-fast charger and CCS adapter. Actual charge time may vary. Plus, with class-leading interior space, 7 high-powered USB-C ports, and advanced features like Highway Driving Assist 2, every journey is seamless. And for peace of mind, there's a 10-year, 100,000-mile battery warranty. Ready to explore more? Learn more about the Ioniq 9 at HyundaiUSA.com. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.
Why are there ridges on Reese's peanut butter cups? Probably so they never slip from her hands. Could you imagine? I'd lose it. Luckily, Reese's thought about that. Wonder what else they think about. Probably chocolate and peanut butter.
Stylistically, you used kind of just like a white outline to kind of show the emotion. Was there something deliberate about the use of that color and the way that it was kind of drawn out on screen?
Well, I think that each child kind of has a shade because it's like a white outline that's slightly shaded in certain places. And I think even like, mom, Magdalena, like we kind of suggest that she's a bird and her color is red. It's just like, but I think we were just trying to like kind of give a nod towards like the idea of magical realism, but also not do full animation that can be manipulative in terms of expressing every tear and every wrinkle and every facial expression, and also trying to honor what it's like, a child's point of view, and also the vagaries of memory and starvation, and also somehow also incorporate the belief systems that were Indigenous and are kind of surrounded, that are whirling around in the Amazon, So it was very deliberate, and I think we felt like as the audience didn't know if they had survived yet,
right,
and no one could find them, we shouldn't probably see them.
Yeah, so it almost plays out like in real time. We're experiencing that maybe as they would as well, because there's confusion on the audience's part as much as you can imagine the confusion on the survivor's part as well.
Yeah, and it was just trying to respect, like acknowledge the boundaries, acknowledge like where we're assembling this to the best of our ability.
So the added complication is the respect for Leslie's ancestral knowledge. How do you ensure that her knowledge was portrayed accurately and respectfully? Because most of the people that watch this may be their first understanding of her ancestry or her culture, et cetera.
I think that we used the Colombian Special Forces very much as a way, as kind of like a stand-in for an audience in terms of their journey to respecting the Indigenous belief systems. Because, for the most part, like, their Colombian Special Forces, some of the best in the world. They are predominantly Catholic. Yeah. And you watch them through this experience come to respect that the Indigenous, like the Witoto community believes that there's more than meets the eye here. You can't, I was astonished that you actually see this happen in the footage, and it's real. Like, they really believe, okay? And they're using Blackhawks to carry in alcohol to please the duende. It's a great leap of faith, but I think it's also a great example of how you can find common ground. And, it's like this common humanity. And especially like when it's down to trying to save the lives of 4 children, like that is the motivation they needed. And this is, as you know, like you've mentioned that you have been interested in the FARC for a long time. Like these are huge, like historical, contextual, like conflicts, there's a lot of stuff there, and that they're able to bridge that is very meaningful.
I remember I met somebody from Colombia not too long ago, and I asked what they thought of the FARC, and they looked at me like cross-eyed, like, well, it's like they don't even exist anymore. So it just seems to be such. I was just confused, like, well, like the guerrillas, like we don't worry about it anymore. So, what is the feeling in Colombia?
Well, that's a very complicated question because the reality is that the FARC, as we knew them back then before the peace process, like basically ended, they became part of it, became a political party. Part of them, become dissidences, and those dissidences became, again, other fractions of other groups, which are still becoming illegal groups in several parts of the country. Like you have to understand that I think in our country, the guerrillas and the paramilitary groups, that were fighting for different ideas, eventually became, influences and contaminated by the drug business. And nowadays, the reality is that those ideas, at least in my perception, are gone. And basically, you have illegal forces that are controlling territory, to keep the drug business alive, which is the reality of what most of the people that were part of the FARC that still in those territories are taking part of, So the FARC, as we knew them, as in terms of the ideology, in my opinion, died in the peace process. But the reality of the armed groups, in the illegal groups that predominantly live in those areas, which are the abandoned areas of this country, is still very much alive. And they don't really know anymore if they're left or right or up or down. They're just mercenaries who control territory and who work either for the Mexican cartels or the, European kind of routes. So it's kind of, it's everything is about territorial control based by illegal forces. So now many people that were part of the FARC are part of those groups, but you know what I mean? Like it's very complicated.
Very complicated.
And very violent today. Yeah. And there are fractions of the FARC which still call themselves FARC, but are differences between them, even in the territories. You have the Juan Marquez territory defenses versus the Second Marquetalia. So it's complicated. But the problem, which is the drug business, still there.
Another question I wondered while watching is, how did she and her siblings view their survival through the lens of their indigenous belief system?
I think that's a really interesting question. And I think that this is where we kind of run into the circumstances of their age.
Yeah.
I think what's the best way to try to understand it is like they grew up in the jungle. And it's like, she had never been on an airplane before. She'd never seen a skyscraper. But they did always make little houses and play games in the jungle. I'll never forget when I met Tien, he was running around and he grabbed a cocoa pod, smashed it on a rock and was eating it. And I was like, oh, he's 5. Clearly this is what he knows how to do. Like my kids certainly couldn't do it. Right. So I think there's something about the context of their lives where they are like the jungle is a safe space. It's a home space. It's a space they respect, but it's not the way you or I would see it, but or at least I would see it, experience it. So I think that's something with time, we'll understand more. But we were trying to really respect that they're young and they were starving and the sense of time was lost, they, as someone says in the film, they're more scared. They're scared of people. They're not necessarily scared of the jungle.
Yeah.
Because of these, the generational trauma left by the rubber trade, the generational trauma of the conflict with the military and guerrillas, it's very complicated. And we tried hard to really acknowledge it and navigate our way through.
What do you hope then that the global audience is going to understand about indigenous wisdom from this story?
Oh, I think that the military brings it to life best, where they just go on this journey to really respect that they are things they may not know. And that many things can be true at once, right? And, I think there's a way of looking at the world that the indigenous bring to life. And Juan mentions this often about the jungle is this incredible force, right? And but again, a lot of different places have similar, adjacent belief systems. Like the Japanese believe that every rock or every tree has a spirit to it. There's ways of understanding the world we live in that vary from culture to culture, but I think there's room for all of it. And I think especially given we're living in very complicated times between climate change, between what's happened, like the rise of authoritarianism around the world, just the demise of women's rights around the world, there's something about the individual courage of all these participants that I find very inspiring.
It's here, your long-awaited PTO. You pack up, grab your sunscreen, walk out the door, and stick the key under the mat. Just one problem. You're being safe-ish. Safe-ish. It's those little tricks that don't actually keep us safe, like the key under the mat or the old leaving the lights on routine. For true peace of mind, sit back and let ADT's technicians install a security system customized for your home, with features like 24/7 monitoring and cameras you can check from your phone. So go ahead, break in those new flip-flops. And whatever you do, don't settle for safe-ish. Visit ADT.com to find out more.
On Boxing Day 2018, 20-year-old Joy Morgan was last seen at her church, Israel United in Christ, or IUIC.
I just went on my Snapchat and I just see her face plastered everywhere.
This is The Missing Sister, the true story of a woman betrayed by those she trusted most.
IUIC is my family and the best family that I've ever had.
But IUIC isn't like most churches.
This is a devilish cult.
When you get that feeling where I don't want to be here. I want to get out. It's like that feeling of, I want to go home now.
I'm Charlie Brinkhurst-Cuff, and after years of investigating Joy's case, I need to know, what really happened to Joy? Binge all episodes of The Missing Sister exclusively and ad-free right now on Wondery Plus. Start your free trial of Wondery Plus on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or in the Wondery app.
So let's go back to the rescue mission for a moment. What were some of the most surprising things that you uncovered about the search and rescue effort?
The more surprising, I think the most surprising for me was the end of the story, which is the situation with the helicopter, which was very crazy. Because at the end, everything is extremely crazy. Everything is surreal. Nothing of what happens is what the usual thing. But once you understand the whole story, and then you understand that they are fighting to live, and then the helicopter arrives and they're trying to leave, but then the jungle becomes like this monster. And we see the footage and we see that what they're telling us is real, and you see the storm and you see how it will happen. That was for me very shocking. And that was for me a moment where you kind of realize in the film that the strength of the jungle, So for me, in terms of the rescue, that little piece of the operation, I think everything is extremely surreal and, parallel to anything I've ever known. But I think that gave an end to the whole story, which was this push and pull, which was the supernatural with the reality that, at least for me, was very impressive. And to be able to see it in the footage, that was actually happening, because they describe it as it was a sunny day and then suddenly everything turned dark and the jungle became this force. And so it's it was a moment to respect the strength of it. So for me, that was kind of a shocking moment of the rescue.
Well, you describe in the film this merging of mystical spirituality and mortal heroism. How did you decide how much to lean into each of those elements in the storytelling?
It's interesting. I feel like, in my film, The Rescue, I really explored this question. Because in that circumstance, was it the spirit of the princess that was holding the children hostage or not? And did the monk actually save the children? It's again, and you had U.S. Special Forces there working on trying to save them. It was just, I think we really lean into it. And I think that, it's again, a craft question, how we were able to intertwine it. But I think that, Juan and I always agreed that this was kind of at the center of our film. Even the poster, I would always say to our various, our graphics people, I'm I need more ayahuasca in the poster. I just need more, because it's just a different way of seeing the world. And that's why we make, it's truth is stranger than fiction. It's why we make these nonfiction films. And clearly there's something extraordinary that transpired here.
Well, the score and the editing are described as central to capturing the multiple perspectives. How did you guide those creative choices?
I love editing. It's like my favorite. Editors are my favorite people. The way writers are my favorite people in our fiction films. Claudia Sarn composed an amazing score for this, and like her original kind of like I knew she was the right choice because when she first kind of screened a rough cut, she said it's the magic flute, and I was like, that's absolutely right. It is the magic flute. Just more this idea of this journey that someone goes on in the supernatural and like kind of the life of the jungle and also the inner life and belief systems of the participants. And so it was quite painstaking. It's very deliberate in many places. We worked really closely together because, it's a very fine line again between it feeling like almost too Orientalist in some way, like too much like what we think the jungle should sound like, and it also, documentaries really rely on our scores to help underscore the narrative of a movie or the emotional movements of a movie. And so, again, it's kind of similar to our animation where we tried to do the lightest touch, but with the most intention.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of editing, it was, we had a wonderful edit team. And, it was hard. Like we had already assembled kind of an amazing film just about the military and the Indigenous rescuers. And then we got access to the children. So it's re-edit the whole movie. Like, but that's kind of the work, right? Like we write our documentaries in the edit. And I personally really enjoy that element because it's, you really can shape a story and honor what you think is true in that story and honor people's voices. It's really about how closely you can listen. Mm-hmm. And it's fun. It's the fun part of it.
My last two questions are, the first is, beyond the obvious survival story, the film touches on poverty and neglect and violence in the region. So how important was it for you to widen the lens beyond the immediate story?
For me, it was extremely important. As a Colombian, I realized, very from the beginning that it was an opportunity to tell the bigger story about what's happening in the country. Because when you ask yourself, why are 4 kids that have never seen a car doing on an airplane in the middle of the Amazon? Mm-hmm. You have to unpack what's behind it and then landing in the middle of the highways where all the drug traffickings are actually happening, So, and the reality of, these abandoned groups, which are, under the influence of these armed illegal forces, and they have to accept, that the reality of the government showing up is just by armed forces and army, and that's the reason why they collide all the time. So for me, it was immediately an opportunity that I saw to be able to tell the story of my country, of the reality that we're living, but at the same time to be able to tell a story of hope, that beyond the differences, beyond everything that is happening in my country, there are opportunities if we really are able to, get ourselves together and go beyond these differences and understand that the differences in my country specifically are amazingly powerful and rich, right? We have the Amazon, but you have 2 oceans, you have Black and Indigenous and white and mountains. And all these differences makes us rich. And I think we need to understand that in a country that is so polarized and so violent, that if we come together, we can do something powerful. And the kids represent the future, at the end. And it was the only reason why there was so much efforts, because they were kids, and I think we need to think about the future, and we need to think about that, because what's the country and what's the world we want to leave to them, So for me, it was just too many elements that could represent what I believe it's important in my country and the world to actually start thinking about.
Yeah, because you're like, if these 2 groups can have a joint mission to honor children, why can't the rest of the world? I mean, that to me, absolutely. And then my last question is, what do you hope that this film how do you hope that it contributes to conversations about resilience, Indigenous knowledge, and also cooperation across divides?
I mean, it's an incredible story of how, despite overwhelming obstacles, be it political differences, religious belief system differences, or these vast spaces of the Amazon, that people really can come together and find a common humanity. And, I think that's on one side in terms of the military and the Indigenous rescuers. I think in terms of Leslie and her siblings, her story of strength about, making really the worst event of her life into like an amazingly inspiring story of someone who has the courage and the strength to keep her siblings alive, and also very honestly reckons with this idea that either she's got to go back to this abusive situation, but that might be the way to save her kid, her brother and sisters. And like, you know, I think that it was very brave of her to tell her story and share it. And hopefully that's kind of like a karmic break in some way, you know, it allows her an opportunity, and, you know, that can inspire other people as well.
Well, let me tell you, you guys are going to win some awards.
You're very sweet. Thank you.
I'm not kidding you. You're going to get awards, and you deserve it. And so does your team. I can't even imagine how much work went into this. And it is so clear it is done with such an enormous amount of love and care. And I really think it shows. So I want to first congratulate you and your team. This is beautifully done. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That means so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank my fantastic guests and remind you to make sure that you click subscribe to get more of these episodes, and make sure that you also leave a 5-star review. Please join the Facebook group Reality Life with Kate Casey. Also, make sure you are subscribed to my What to Watch list at katecasey.substack.com, and my bonus episodes, which you can find on Apple Podcast and on Patreon. Lastly, make sure that you follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at KKCCA, TikTok, it's KKC, and Twitter, Thread, and Blue Sky at KKC. Check back tomorrow for an all-new episode with the most hilarious Patrick Hickey.
Hi, I'm Denise Chan, host of Scam Factory. You might remember hearing about our investigative series that exposed what's really happening behind those suspicious texts you get. Inside heavily guarded compounds across Asia, thousands are trapped and forced to scam others or risk torture. One of our most powerful stories was Jella's, a young woman who thought she'd found her dream job, only to end up imprisoned in a scam compound. Her escape story caught the attention of Criminal's Phoebe Judge, and I'm honored to share more details of Jella's journey with their audience. But Jella's story is just one piece of this investigation. In Scam Factory, we reveal how a billion-dollar criminal empire turns job seekers into prisoners, and how the only way out is to scam your way out. Ready to uncover the full story? Binge all episodes of Scam Factory now. Listen to Scam Factory on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts.